between the old parking garage and the Bilbo Cemetery, and obviously bookended by I-10 and this wonderful asset waterfront property called Lake Charles. What a great site. There was a lot of discussion both prior to the workshop and during it about that ugly parking garage. How many times did I hear, well, when are you tearing it down? And while, the objective in the workshop was to say anything is possible, we want your input, we had a thought. And our thought was, let's test it to say that we want to keep it. And the reason I felt it was important to maintain it was living the world of urban planning. It comes down to almost every decision is made on how people park, because we all have cars. That asset, as I view it, is worth in numbers to, if you built it from scratch, about $7 million. It's ugly. It's less efficient than a brand new garage. But if there were a way to salvage it, I think we need to explore it. So hold that thought for a second. If you tear it down, we have about 400 parking spaces in that garage. Tear it down, it would take about 4 acres to replace that amount of parking at grade. 4 acres of developable property in a downtown is extremely valuable, and I would argue that that deck makes huge sense to maintain, to create a functional component for whatever you do. So how do you overcome the weaknesses? Well, you'll see some discussion about that. We're going to line it, we're going to renovate it, we're going to add new elevators, but we're going to keep it, and we're going to use it in a way that can be leveraged to accommodate the uses that we're proposing, the mix of uses. So keep that in mind. Bilbo Park on the eastern side, everybody kept talking about it, but when we visited it, it was almost indistinguishable from the backdrop. It was not this civic piece, this historic component. So during the workshop, we decided, based on the input, that we should celebrate it. It should be part of whatever we create. It should be part of the fabric. It should be part of the history. And so we'll engage it. And then obviously we're going to engage the waterfront. The other piece of information we received prior to the workshop was that the property in the knuckle, or in the property fronting pinnacle, it is the only property that has not been permitted to allow for encroachment into the lake. That would require time. It would require some complexity. It is state-owned land. The 2 properties bordering us actually can be extended, and what you're seeing on this diagram show essentially how that can happen. So during the charrette in 2007, and again prior to the charrette in our preparation for this workshop, we were envisioning this magnificent marina, this romantic kind of European place where we could see sailboats docking. Unfortunately for us, that area of the lake has been silting in for a while, and it appears as though it will consistently silt in. And so from an economic perspective, it didn't make total sense for us to go in and create this marina. But we did want to acknowledge that we're on waterfront. We want to engage in it in more ways than simply looking at it. And it came out over and over again that boaters in this community would love to be able to take boats to a place where they could go to food service places, retail, venues of entertainment, things of that nature. And so what we did, and you'll see it in the scheme, we decided, as opposed to having to dredge this, periodically and actually frequently, we would bring finger piers out into the lake and allow boaters to come to the finger piers and access the waterfront and the docking facilities. So that you'll see in this presentation. The other control point we had was that there is a mandate in the master plan and in legislation that there be a 25-foot public walkway that fronts the waterway. You cannot make it private. So we had to adhere to that, which we found to be actually an amenity and not a negative. And so keep in mind when you see the drawings that was part and parcel of what we wanted to do. The other thing we did is we tested the participants in the workshop. We said, listen, as you have a clean slate, we can develop any kind of buildings you want. You can do modernist, you can do traditionalist, you can do something in between. What would you like? And overwhelmingly, people said, this is Lake Charles. We want it to be Lake Charles. So let's celebrate Lake Charles. Actually, there were some people who said, let's look like Austin. because Austin is a big success now. Let's create Austin. And the group, the way the process works, said, why do we want to copy a place that really isn't us? Because let me tell you, you have one of the most significant historic fabrics in this state, and do not ever question it. You need to celebrate it. Now, there's some challenges that we'll talk a little bit about. So in the development of the pattern language that we're going to be proposing to developers, we're suggesting to them that this is the language we would like to move forward. It's not necessarily an option for them to change that. The next thing is the context. What are we dealing with? What are the positives? What are the negatives? So these are just slides. Our team was here a few weeks before the workshop. We spent 2 days actually going through, doing sketches, talking about some of the assets and the positive and negative, and tried to understand how we could leverage what you've already done. We were blown away at what you've already created. I mean, my goodness. You guys have done a phenomenal job. And, I follow the media across the state, and I can recall reading in the paper and watching, we get the same television stations you guys get, and I watch it all the time, and hearing about, the background noise about how much money you're spending. And we're thinking in our community, wow, wish we had that. This is an amazing thing, and I would suggest that in the next 10 years, you'll be looking back at this and saying, how visionary were we? So we want to leverage this. We believe this is what we will take next to the project that we're talking about. So we began developing what we call cartoons. Essentially what this is nothing more than putting a scale to a site. What we used in this diagram was the market studies that we acquired in 2008. Immediately after the 2007 plan, your administration said, let's get moving. What's the next step? So, well, you have to identify your market. You don't want to just shoot in the dark here. And we hired 2 companies, one out of New Jersey, the other out of Rhode Island, who they're specialists in urban place. And they came in and they forecasted the market. And it was pretty soft, and they were concerned, but there was a general understanding that we needed to introduce living, we needed to introduce retail and commercial, we needed to introduce a venue that was catering to a younger population. Now, today, with the advent of the activity that you have, that is only more animated. And the truth is, the market that you need to be focused on is 2 primary demographics. The younger 24 to 32-year-olds, which will be coming in here, we believe, in a pretty significant way. And they're going to be looking for a lifestyle that, unfortunately, Louisiana in general does not offer. And we're losing that population to other places. This is the opportunity to invite them back. New Orleans, on the other hand, it's a new frontier for that generation. It's called the millennials. And so what are they looking for? Well, they're looking for an urban existence. They're not their grandparents, although their grandparents are turning into them. We'll talk about that in a second. They are looking for a kind of an existence that is exciting, that does not have a lot of maintenance associated with it. They're very mobile and nimble. They want sustainability, efficiency. They're very green. And so the urban lifestyle is what they crave. And that's why the Austins of the world, and now Houston and Atlanta, the Bucktowns of the world, they're the recipient of all of this activity. Your market, your Sasols and those people of the world are going to be hiring a lot of that population. So how are we going to get them here, and more importantly, keep them here? This is how you do it. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, I mentioned a minute ago that their grandfathers are turning into the millennials. What's happening is the boomers on the other end of the spectrum are actually beginning to migrate to the urban centers as well, because they too are beginning to learn that the romantic notion of cutting 5 acres of property and painting a 5,000 or 6,000 square foot house every 3 or 4 years isn't what it was cut out to be, and they're beginning to want this kind of lifestyle as well. So we know that there is a significant depth to the market for those 2 demographics. Now, when you do living, you also need to do the 24/7 components. You're downtown today. When I drove here today, your parking lots were relatively full. Right now, they're empty. You don't have a 24/7 downtown. They're leaving at 5 o'clock or thereabouts. If they lived here, they would be here 24/7. And all of these activities that they require to stay here would be built. What we're trying to do is prepare this seed to accommodate that vision so that the rest of your downtown, parallels your 2007 plan, will begin to follow that pattern. And so what we're doing here is beginning to look at that market. And the middle block, the square that you see, is what we refer to as a live-work block. And it contains restaurants. We believe there can be at least 4 restaurants in this product. It will have retail. We have 34,000 square feet of potential commercial retail in this block. And we're looking at a model of about 200 residential units, because that is a model that developers find to be economical and work well to manage and construct. So that's what that component looks like. To the right, we have a hotel gestured. The market, we believe, is strong. 6 weeks prior to the workshop, we had calls. The mayor was being contacted, and you're going to find that there's going to be people all over the country looking at Lake Charles. We've gotten contacted by a Canadian who's interested in looking at work here. A lot of people are starting to look at Lake Charles because of the activity. We had 2 hotels contact us, interested in what we might have in mind. One was more interested in another location in the city. This one, the second, was interested in this product. So as we float this to the top, you'll start to see a number of different users become more apparent. We developed the concept a little bit further, thinking about the connectivity. By the way, I mentioned connectivity earlier. It's not simply about connectivity to the I-10 corridor. It is connectivity to your current urban fabric. Your current streets need to grid into this project. You need to be able to get to this site without having to drive around I-10 underneath the bridge and get here. We have to grid in. We need to connect for pedestrians. I hope that when this product is built, that you will be able to walk from the Civic Center after an event to have dinner at a restaurant that's located on the boardwalk in this particular project, and actually stay in a hotel here, or may even live here. That's the dynamic we're looking for. You may not need a car. That's the hope. So we're finessing the drawings, and these are sketches. We had 5 people working full-time during the workshops. All of the information was being disseminated. The block that I mentioned earlier in the center was a live-work block with apartments and it's rental primarily. Someone mentioned, well, how can we buy a place there? Started to think about how we accommodate purchasing. And this diagram that you can see, you might see apartments written on the top. Someone said, have you ever stood on I-10 and listened to the traffic? I said, no, I can't say that I have. Sounds kind of interesting. So we immediately went out there, stood out on that highway, and I got to tell you, I came to an amazing realization that we can't sell rental or condominiums facing that I-10 corridor. But we can create a hotel that creates a buffer for that housing. And so in the next scheme, you'll see we took the hotel and created the liner for I-10. We can design the hotel to deal with the decibel levels. The living is a little more difficult because of price point. We developed about 13 different schemes testing all of the information we collected. These are those drawings. The purple drawing, the drawing of the lower left, it was the beginning of discussing what the size of a hotel would be. This is a 120-room branded hotel. A lot of people wanted a boutique. Boutiques could be fine. We felt we needed to at least float to the top the concept of a brand. And then we developed what we refer to here as the final draft. And I want to stress draft. We are listening right now. We're still listening. We will be listening for a while. The developers are going to come in and listen even further. You need to say to me, you don't like this, and I'm open to that. I'm totally comfortable with that. But tell me something positive. What can we do differently? What do we need to do differently? But keep in mind, we had a vision. We're maintaining that vision. We wanted to keep moving our community forward with this kind of collective vision of things. So this is the plan. Now, the center building, and unfortunately, I don't think this works, but no, it won't work on that screen. The center building, here we go. This is your parking garage. So the 9.2 acres is to the right, and this was really our commission to develop. But in the beginning of the workshop, people began to talk about the property to the west of the garage And why aren't we doing something with that? So we felt obligated to begin discussing what options you might have. Now, the big differential between those two properties, the west, the city cannot sell. It can only lease. The east, it has options to do anything by law. And so we wanted to approach it differently so that we could play that out. So what you're going to see to the west of the garage is the notion that what if we had a major national tenant come to us, which we already have, by the way, an outdoors company, 180,000 to 200,000 square foot footprint, want to locate in Lake Charles. How would it fit? We couldn't put it on the eastern property. It wouldn't fit. We couldn't park it. It couldn't fit on the site. So the footprint you see on the building to the left, the big square roof building with the marina component to it, is 185,000 square feet. Big box guy. I throw some names out, but you probably already know who they could be. Pretty cool things. That only can be accommodated because we can fill out into the lake. And I'll show you how it actually lays out in a second. So let's focus on the 9+ acre property. So the buildings are pretty much paralleling what we just talked about. The uses that I spoke about are outlined here. And so here's that garage. What we're proposing is a liner building, so it's this blue building all the way around. We're buffering it with a 30-foot easement, essentially, that allows us to provide services on the back side of those buildings. And we envision terminating the building at the edge of the garage here with a restaurant. It doesn't actually engage the water, but the vision would be that this restaurant could also have outdoor seating on the boardwalk, which is the gray area that's located here. The live work is 34,000 square feet of commercial, mixed use. And we don't define specifically what it is. We envision 4 restaurants. We envision at least 1 restaurant anchoring the garage. We envision 2 restaurants in line with the live work on the waterfront. And we envision the potential, which came up at least in every meeting, the idea of a standalone restaurant out into the lake. Now, that's not permitted today. So we'd have to go to the next step and get that done, but in time we could do that. And so we showed it to show how it occurred. What you see in white is public streets. They're not private, they're urban, they're on-street parked, street trees, 15-foot sidewalks, very urban. The buildings that we see here follow your plan, your comprehensive plan. They're 4 stories tall. They could be 5. We felt 4 accommodated the market, and we could park it on site. So these buildings are roughly that scale. You have 2 blocks. The hotel buffers the I-10. As you go east on the service road, the sound is diminished significantly. And so what we did is we provided for a live-work piece to the far right, and this is actually another 200 units. This roadway connects and continues east until it, and actually I'll show you a drawing. Veterans Memorial Boulevard, back up a second. Veterans Memorial Park, I'm sorry, is now going to be part of a major street that connects to Lawrence. It aligns to Lawrence Street. So now you'll be able to come from downtown, take a left, and go directly into this project without having to deviate around the I-10 corridor, which is mandatory for us to animate and connect to the life of the downtown. You can see by virtue of the fact that we are now running a new roadway, a street along the frontage to Bilbo Park, Cemetery, that we're now creating that connectivity to a pretty significant history of this city, and we intend to rebuild that cemetery as part of this project. So then we move to the west, the big box concept. So the idea here is that we would have a sports and outdoor retail component, additional restaurants, and that we're also proposing connecting the roadway that I mentioned earlier from the east, again, all the way through here, that would go back to the frontage road at the visitor center. So the hope here was you already have a visitor center. You create this big box potential retailer who has a draw into the community. It celebrates the visitor center with new life that it wouldn't get otherwise. and begins to animate all of the other uses, connecting it to the live-work pieces. It's all connected by the boardwalk. And then further to the west, we have the beach. We have that activity. We have lots of concept for that. We didn't take it that far yet, but you have the potential of being able to expand it. This red line represents the bank today, so you can kind of get a sense of what it would take to accommodate the big box concept. The buildings on the outer edge are, again, potential retailer, live-work. The liner along the garage is a living piece. So those are things that we would look at using. So what would it look like, or what could it look like? Well, these are our renditions of the history of this place. This is more about the scale. It's about the public streets, the 25-foot public way that runs along the water, continuing the whole idea of the boardwalk you've already built. The two piers you see are 300 feet out into the water. We looked at Google Earth and tried to get a sense of where that sedimentation was occurring. We're told that the water depth in this area is about 5 feet. So again, it may have to be further out, but the concept is that people can come now to this location by boat, dock their boat, and go in to restaurants and activities that might occur. The other thing that happens is the 25-foot mandate, because of the configuration of the land, it expands to about 85 feet at the center point here. So you have another venue to have outdoor events. It could be concerts, it could be a number of different things. What we're envisioning is a ground floor of commercial retail, 2 floors of rental apartments, and the fourth floor for sale condos. The objective there, at least in concept, was that we want to accommodate the millennial population in a rental configuration, second, third floor, and the boomer population who are downsizing from the big house to the main house as a condo overlooking the lake. Pretty easy. Now, you don't have a lot, you have 32 units of that product. There aren't a ton of those. So this is a concept drawing. That sailboat is stuck there, it can't move. And then moving in, I'm coming in from Contraband Bayou on Friday afternoon to go to a couple of restaurants that might exist. By the way, we believe that this location can support some pretty serious restaurants, square footage-wise. We're also a big believer that the first step for our developer will be to scan the local market to find out what locally can work here. Our goal will be to promote a local kind of an existence, although it doesn't preclude certainly national tendencies. The other option too with the cabanas that we're showing out here, this came up repeatedly, that you might have a lake, but there's no real way for the general public that doesn't have a boat or a way to get into the water can engage in it. So we talked about the opportunity to have venues that would offer rental kayaks, things of that nature, canoeing. So these venues could also be expanded to include that. Oh, oh boy. Let me back up. Okay. This view is taking a view from from Veterans Memorial Park. So we're building now the new 25-foot boardwalk. You're coming into the Pinnacle site. You can kind of see to the left the pier that goes out. To the right, you'll notice the street furniture, the lighting, the concept of landscaping. All of those things are simply picking up on what you've already done and continuing that entire boardwalk along the edge to the new center that we're creating here. We're looking for a good name, by the way, so if you come up with one, we'd love to hear that. Again, you can see, get a sense of the scale. The building's 4 stories tall, the architecture gesturing what it is that we want it to look like. The building in the background is the terminated vista, we call it. It is the parking garage. And so you have an opportunity of doing something special there. Now, along the I-10 corridor, we are looking at having the exit now much easier to access. The building to the far right is the liner building to the garage. So we would have lofts that are single depth facing our main street. And then the liner that I referenced facing I-10 would be the hotel. a drop-off located right at the corner, and set in this backdrop of a very urban, walkable kind of an environment. So this is the vision. Now, we've had lots of input to generate it. We've created some other kind of, we want to try and terminate our views into the fabric you already have. This is a view into the cemetery. I mean, that cemetery is absolutely phenomenal if we were able to clean it up and actually focus some of the architecture on it. So this is kind of a view of where we would go with it. Now, we need to take all of these ideas, and we're going to develop, you know, I said a 30,000-foot view was the code that we wrote in 2007. This concept is at a 5,000. We're going to drill down to ground level, and we're going to create the standards. And those standards, this is just an example of what they will be, specify the social tools that are required to make it work. You know, the streets don't work if they're 50 feet wide. We want walkability, so they have to be slower. Street trees shade the pedestrians. They create this outdoor space that has richness to it. So we define all of that. So the developer who would submit a proposal is not guessing what we want. This is the rule. Now, they may design it differently, but the specificity of what it is we will mandate is here. We're going to expand, this is the public domain. We're going to expand the guidelines in the RFQ that Randy referenced, or the RFO, to define the quality of the architecture, the materials, the quality of the boardwalk. All of those things will be defined. The scale. And when they get this proposal, we're taking a lot of their guesswork away, and the purpose for that is to cut through the red tape that often accompanies an RF process. It's just very cumbersome typically, so our goal will be to move this very quickly by answering the questions up front and making everyone take this very seriously. That's our hope. You've been through a couple of missteps. I don't think they're missteps at all. I think this is actually setting us up for a significant success.